YouTube, what's going on? It's the Lowlight Factory. Here today we're going to give you an update on the Ukrainian counterattack and what's going on in the battlefield in general. So stay tuned and let's get into the video. Alright, so as you can see, we are in the southern front of Ukraine. If we zoom out a little bit, we'll be able to see the entire country and what's going on. And in this front, this is basically where the main counterattacks are coming from. If we zoom into this front, basically we can see, and if we just draw it out, right, we'll be able to see that the Ukrainians are counterattacking from basically the Mykolaiv area. They're counterattacking here in the center, and then they also have a prong in the north that's coming through. Basically, earlier in the month, what happened is that the Ukrainians, if we zoom in just a little bit more here, we'll see that the Ukrainians did actually counterattack earlier in the month, but they ran across this river, and basically when they crossed the river, they were pretty much wiped out and destroyed, and that basically destroyed their counterattack. So right now, what they're doing is they're basically just counterattacking and putting pressure on multiple fronts. They're using artillery very intelligently to basically soften the Russians up, and then they're just gearing up and moving more equipment in the area to prepare for a counterattack. In military terms, this is pretty effective. Instead of what the Russians are doing, which is the Russians are basically just attacking at all times and wearing their forces down, they're building up troops and then they're attacking in larger contingents to take more ground. So if you look right now, the front actually hasn't changed in a while. Let's go to the time map where we can see how the front has changed since the beginning of this counterattack. Alright, so we're here with the map that basically shows the different days of this counterattack and how it went down. We're going to start with June 15th because basically on June 15th, that's kind of when they officially announced their counterattack and like what they were doing in the south. So we're going to just see what the situation was there. And here you can see basically on June 15th, the counterattack really probably wasn't going that well for the Ukrainians. They really didn't gain much. And if you keep going down to June 16th, 17th, 18th, you'll see that the Russians actually, due to the river systems in the area, they basically set up strong defensive networks to repulse the Ukrainians. So in this case, you'll see that their counterattack really did not gain that much ground. They did have small gains here and there, but again, they really just did not get the gains they were hoping for. The main axis of the counterattack obviously was from Mykolaiv, but then they also had an axis going into these called like Velka Alexandrivka, I want to say, area. And basically these failed for this time period. So that counterattack didn't work. And from then, if we keep going down to the map, we'll see that there haven't really been many changes. So like, what can we take away from this time map? And we'll just keep going through the days real quick just so we can kind of see what's going on. Well, the one thing we can take away from this time map is that the counterattack really has not been that successful. They've kind of stalled out in their counterattack, and basically right now what they're trying to do is soften the Russians up enough so they can actually be successful in the next phase of their counterattack. So again, if we keep going, we'll see that the Ukrainians really haven't gained that much ground. Villages here and there, and again, it is a large front line, so it's tough to gain a lot of ground with a front line this large, but they've gained some villages here and there, but really it hasn't been decisive as they had hoped. And in this war, that's basically what we're finding, that the defender has a huge advantage with drones being able to see oncoming attackers, thousands of artillery pieces on this front, basically able to hammer any soldiers moving out in the open. It's really becoming a sort of like a World War I situation where the team that's assaulting or the country that's assaulting takes a lot of heavy casualties and really doesn't get a lot in return for that. So again, we've seen some small gains by the Ukrainians, but not really a lot to speak for. One thing we're also going to go over is the artillery situation. So on this front, like the Eastern Front, they basically had a huge artillery duel going on. If we click over to the heat map, what this heat map is this is basically a NASA satellite that can detect extended fires or very large explosions that create a lot of heat, and it can basically pocket mark when those explosions happen. So if you look in this case, and this is as of today, you're going to see that the shelling is actually very equal. In the beginning of this counteroffensive, the Russians actually had much more artillery, but now you're seeing that it's equaling out as the HIMARS system and other systems are destroying depots, destroying artillery systems. The Russians are basically going to lose their artillery superiority in the area. And when they do actually lose artillery superiority, I think that's when you're going to see this front line move. So as you can see right now, it's somewhat even in terms of the artillery marks in the area. And this is basically why you have stalemate. So once this changes, whether the Ukrainians can destroy enough artillery pieces and depots to kind of gain fire superiority, or the Russians bring in more artillery in the area and somehow gain fire superiority, I think that's what's going to move the front line, as artillery has been key in this war. So again, that's been my analysis of the artillery portion of this front. All right, so what can we gauge from this southern counteroffensive for Ukraine? Well, one thing we can gauge is that all in all, up until now, that the offensive has not really been that successful. Again, in this war, a lot of the armies that go on the offense really suffer heavily, and they really don't gain a lot of ground very easily. So you're seeing that in this war, that even though the Russians were talked about a lot for their lack of offensive capability, both armies are finding that it's a lot more difficult to actually attack than it is to defend. So in this war, we're seeing that play out. I think in this front, this is going to take possibly months to actually move this front line to where, to be successful, Ukraine at least wants to take up until this point right here. Right? They at least want to have the city of Kherson, and then they want to control along the Dnieper River. They want to control a front line where they can hold easily. That, I think, would be success for Ukraine, but even then, that could take months, as you see just how slow this front line moves. So that's been my analysis of this front line. What do you guys think about it? Do you guys have any other insight and information? Again, these maps are not 100%, so this front line could have possibly moved and just not been written down, but for now, this is what we have. So put your comments below. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe. For more Ukraine news, make sure to subscribe.